Last night, we aired an in-depth interview with Republican candidate for governor Christine Drazan. She talked about the campaign, about losing, and about the big issue that may have cost her the election, abortion. It was her first public comments about her race since the November election, and you had plenty to say about what she had to say. But first, here's the crux of what she said on the abortion issue.
It is settled law in Oregon. It is not at risk, and yet it comes up like you have to be afraid of it every single cycle. It is just to manipulate voters. They were not having a conversation.
Well, many of you wrote in and called to leave comments, and you were not having that for not for a second. Jamie emailed to say, wrong. Roe v. Wade was settled law too. And I remember interviews where she displayed wishy-washy language about our Oregon law. That is why she didn't get my vote. Vicki sent in this note. When she made the comment about abortion and settled law, I can't believe you didn't say, oh yeah, Kavanaugh said that too. She's referring to the Supreme Court justice. David emailed this statement. She could have easily said, I will never sign a bill that restricts reproductive health care more than is available today. She never said that. She never said anything like that. She said that the 3 Supreme Court nominees said in their hearings before they overturned. Several of you also shared that you did not vote for Drazan because of her party and her beliefs.
The reason I didn't vote for Christina Drazan was because she was a Republican. She's much too conservative for my thoughts, especially on abortion, and I didn't take into consideration what other people said about her. It was she herself that I was not voting for.
I did not vote for Christine Drazan because I disagree with everything she stands for. I'm pro-choice, I'm pro-gun control, I'm pro-taking care of the poor and the homeless, and taxing the rich. There's no way on God's green earth I'd vote for that woman.
All right, some strong feelings there. We also heard from a few of you who sounded like you were kind of undecided about Drazan during the campaign, but moved away from her because of her lack of strong statements supporting current abortion laws in Oregon. Martha wrote in to say, the one thing that she was not clear about was an opinion on the abortion issue, and I believe she could have kept voters like me if she had been more direct in her statements about the constitutionality of abortion in Oregon. So you see, it was really a big issue. Other voters like Monica seemed frustrated that Drazan did not take a stronger stance, clearly stating her beliefs on abortion and what she would do if she was elected.
The abortion issue wasn't abundantly clear, and I do believe that Tina did campaign on the fear of rolling back abortion. And it is distressing that that one issue is so divisive. I wish the Republicans could put it aside and move forward, because we need business-minded people in government.
And finally, yes, for those of you who supported Drazan for governor, we did get a few comments from folks like you who want her to run again.
My first name's Bob, and I think Christine should run for governor again. I think she'd be a good governor, and I think she'd protect Oregon.
We also wondered if a Republican could ever win the governor's office in Oregon. After all, it seemed the social unrest in Oregon really lined up in Drazan's favor before the election. Lots of you are frustrated with the homeless problem, crime, drugs, violence, taxes, the list goes on. But at the end of the day, none of that was enough to get Drazan over the finish line. It's a bit of context for this. I dialed up a former Republican operative, an insider named Dan Levy. Dan's been in Oregon politics for about 30 years. He's advised Republicans Gordon Smith and Newt Buehler, and he worked for Betsy Johnson as she ran for governor in this past campaign in November. He told me he's a Republican in exile. He left the party a few years ago, and he's now an independent, but he definitely knows his politics. I asked what it will take for a Republican to win the governor's race in Oregon.
A miracle. There's 3 things you should keep in mind about Oregon politics. One is that all politics are now national. Tip O'Neill famously coined the term, all politics is local. Well, now all politics is national. So if you're a Democrat running, you are a representative of the National Democratic Party. Same way with the Republican Party. So the idea that there's a locally branded Republican Party is no longer the case.
Now that's an interesting take on politics, and I did see from some of your comments last night and today after the Drazan interview, you were talking about that. Some of you said that Drazan is a Republican and Republicans back Trump, and you would never vote for Drazan because of Trump. That's a problem if you are a Republican trying to get elected in Oregon. It suggests that it matters really very little what you say or stand for. We'll come back to this in a moment, because right now Dan's going to throw some stats at us.
GOP and 43%. If you look at the last three candidates for governor on the Republican side, Christine Drazan, Newt Buehler, and Bud Pierce, each got about 44% of the vote. In terms of raw vote totals, Bud Pierce got the most. He also spent the least. So what's happening here is no matter whether you're pro-choice or pro-life, whether you have $6 million as Bud Pierce did or $22 million as Christine Drazan did, you're basically getting the same percentage of the vote.
Now, I respect and like Dan, but I was not going to take his word on those numbers, so I looked it up on the Secretary of State's website. In 2022, Drazan, the Republican, got 43.5% of the total vote. That's his most recent election. In 2018, Buehler, the Republican, got 43.6% of the total vote. And in 2016, the special election to replace John Kitzhaber, Republican Bud Pierce, sure enough, got 43.4% of the vote. So he's right on that. Of course, you could argue that abortion was not quite as hot a topic when Buehler ran in 2018, since Roe v. Wade had not yet been overturned. And you could also argue that without Betsy Johnson, Drazan may have received a bigger percentage, but whatever, his basic theory is correct. It doesn't seem to matter what Republicans do or who they field, they're getting 43% of the vote. He was, by the way, wrong on one point. Bud Pierce was not the Republican to get the biggest raw number of votes in those elections. It was Drazan.
The other final thing to keep in mind is the explosion of Democrat voters in the Tri-County area. And the way to think about it is if you go back to 2010, when Chris Dudley almost beat John Kitzhaber, since then, Tina Kotek got about 140,000 more votes in the Tri-County area than John Kitzhaber did, even with Betsy Johnson in the race. And Christine Drazan got about 15,000 more than Chris Dudley did. So the Republican is treading water in the voter-rich Tri-County area, and the Democrat is exploding in their numbers.
So it was back to the Secretary of State's website to verify those numbers, and yep, he is correct. Take a look. 2010 voters in Clackamas, Washington, and Multnomah counties cast 360,218 votes for Democrat John Kitzhaber, 249,637 for Republican Chris Dudley. But in the most recent election, those same three counties, 499,025 voted for Kotek, the Democrat, and 265,337 voted for Drazan, the Republican. So he is correct. Kotek picked up nearly 139,000 votes compared to her fellow Democrat 12 years earlier, and Drazan only picked up roughly 16,000 more votes. I know that's a lot of numbers, but I wanted to put them up there to show you Dan's main point. Pretty much correct. There was huge growth in the number of Democratic votes over the last 12 years in the Tri-County area. The numbers like that, Dan thinks, make it impossible for a Republican to win the governor's office in Oregon, which seems like it would be disappointing for Republicans in Oregon.
Yeah, it is depressing. It's also not good for our democracy. Having a good competitive debate, having a change in parties, I think could be a healthy thing. Having a divided government, a legislature with one party in control, an executive with another party in control. We had that in the mid-90s under John Kitzhaber, a Democrat governor. We had a Republican legislature. That I tend to believe creates better public policy. But the problem is our politics have become so polarized that what voters see is just a national jersey. They don't see Christine Drazan's face. They don't even really see Tina Kotek's face. They just see an R and a D jersey, and they're voting sort of in a parliamentary sense, like they do in European countries, just on the party label, and no longer so much on the benefits and the merits of the candidates. The other thing that's really going on, Pat, is negative partisanship. So we say, well, how many people voted for candidate X? Really, what we should be saying in today's politics, this moment, is how many people voted against candidate Y? Because a lot of people are showing up just to vote against the other party because they fear the other party more than they're concerned about the deficiencies of their own. So you could say in this last race, Swing voters, of which there's very few, feared Republican change more than they were upset about Democrat failures, whether it's in COVID or transportation or the economy or schools or crime or homelessness or you name it. It didn't really matter.
So that's a deep dive into Oregon politics. And just so you know, I'm not for the Republicans. I'm not for the Democrats. I'm for you understanding what's going on. That's why we've given you all these numbers and all this information. I wanted to do that because we're a different sort of news show, and we can tell you not only what happened, we can bring you the informed folks who help you understand why things happen. So, do you have any thoughts about the discussion? We'd love your feedback. Shoot us an email. You can send it to thestory@kgw.com or call and leave a voicemail on our phone line. The number is 503-226-5090. I look forward to hearing from you.